Sydney has burst alive with two major festivals celebrating gender and sexual diversity: Sydney Mardi Gras and World Pride.
Happy Mardi Gras and World Pride, Sydney!
This week, the focus shifts to global human rights at a conference featuring leaders and activists from around the world. Among them is the US Special Envoy on LGBTQI rights, Jessica Stern.
You've set a very high bar, Sydney. I grew up in the suburbs of New York City in a place called Long Island. And you would think in the suburbs of New York City you would have great cosmopolitan access, but I might as well have been thousands of miles away from the origins of the Stonewall riots. I might as well have been on another planet. It was very quiet, very sleepy, and I didn't know a single out LGBTQI person. In fact, the only representations of LGBTQI people I ever saw were sort of maybe occasionally in a TV show as the butt of the joke.
The Obama administration set up the role of Special Envoy in 2015 to advance the rights of LGBTQI people globally. But when Donald Trump came to power, the position was left vacant. Now, with President Joe Biden in the White House, it's been reinstated.
The marginalization and exclusion of LGBTQI people in every country of the world shocks the conscience.
You're the second person to hold this role as Special Envoy. Why does the United States believe that it needs to assert itself on these rights globally?
The US is leaning into our obligation to fight for human rights as a part of democratic resilience and the rule of law for all. There are very few governments in the world that have integrated LGBTQI issues into their foreign policy. In fact, I'm one of just 5 special envoys for LGBTQI rights in the world.
Those communities still face discrimination and violence, and according to Human Rights Watch, at least 67 countries criminalise same-sex relations. Punishment can include jail or even death. So what's your approach to dealing with those countries which disagree?
First of all, I acknowledge that the US doesn't have all the answers. No country in the world has a perfect record on LGBTQI issues. But I really find what interests the country. Some countries care about public health, others care about national economic development, others care about UN standards and treaty body obligations. So I have certain universal messages: no discrimination, no violence, it's never acceptable. But then I tailor it to the priorities of the country.
How do you persuade someone who disagrees with you?
I don't know that I can ever persuade them, but I find that very often other governments that I deal with don't have as much data about LGBTQI issues as I do. So I was just in Japan recently, and I met with LGBTQI activists, and they told me that LGBTQI people in Japan experience suicidal ideation at a rate of 7 times the national average. And I walked into meetings and I shared that fact with government officials, and they were horrified, and they told me we had no idea.
Jessica Stern joined 7:30 on a tour of Sydney's famous gay neighbourhood, Darlinghurst.
So this is the heart of the community. Oxford Street's over there. This is where it all began.
2, 4, 6, 8. Gay is just as good as straight.
It was here 45 years ago, in June 1978, that a day of peaceful protest turned into a night of violence during the first Mardi Gras parade. Back then, homosexuality was illegal in New South Wales, and what followed was a brutal police crackdown.
And this is the original police station where the protesters ended up. They were arrested, it was a night of violence, they were beaten, just for being who they were.
Honestly, I feel like we're walking on hallowed ground. I'm really happy that this place still exists, because they say if you know your history, you don't repeat its mistakes.
In the region, Asian countries are slowly extending rights. In 2019, Taiwan legalised same-sex marriage, while Singapore recently scrapped laws that punished sex between men with jail time.
When you look at global data, you'd find out that this is one of the most under-resourced regions in the entire world. 66% of the world's population lives in Asia and the Pacific, and there's only roughly $33 million a year, US, that goes to support the entire LGBTQI movement. So without a doubt, this community needs every dollar it possibly can raise.
As Sydney World Pride wraps up this weekend with the march across the Harbour Bridge, the event will move on to Washington DC, which will host in 2025.
I can't wait to find out, but I can tell you that World Pride Sydney has set a very high bar.
And while the future of Jessica Stern's role will depend on who wins next year's presidential election, she'll continue to advocate for her community with a message of acceptance.
What I would say to the person watching at home is, you are perfect exactly as you are. Tune out the voices that tell you that you're not good enough. Tune out the voices that tell you you're going to be alone. You will find joy, you will find love, and we need you.